Hello YouTube and welcome to Photoshop Crash Course. Today we are going to look at all of the steps you need to actually get started with Photoshop. So we're going to cover up things such as layers over here. We're going to cover up some effects over here that Photoshop provides. We're going to look at some tools which will help you get started with working in Photoshop, which is actually useful in day-to-day life. So let me go to start up my canvas in Photoshop. I'm going to go over to File, just so that you know it. I'm using Photoshop CS6, so this is the CS6 layout. The other versions might have different layouts, but the settings and other features are basically the same. So I'm going to go over to File, click New, and I'm going to name this as Tutor 2. Alright. So now at the bottom you can see presets. So you simply have to choose the preset that you want to use. For example, if you want to use it for print, choose the ones out here, and if you want to use for screens, use the ones out here. So I'm just going to use web out here, okay, because I want to design something for web maybe a logo or something like that, and I can choose the resolution out here, okay. So now these are the pixels that the screen covers, and once you see that, it is important to choose this before you start designing. So I'm just going to choose this one. Just stick with the presets so that it's an easier workflow. So I'm going to press OK. I don't have to worry about anything else over there, and I can start working on it right here. So now if I hold Alt and scroll my mouse, okay, use my scroll button to scroll in and out, I can zoom in and out in the canvas. So once I zoom it in, I can actually see the scroll bar on the left and at the bottom, which I can use to navigate around and then see the parts of the canvas. So let me just zoom out and raise that out over there. Okay, that's about it. And I can also adjust the percentage from the bottom left over here. For example, this is on 118.02% right now. I can simply choose in 100%, and it's in the exact 100% size right now. So now, before we work in Photoshop, we should always remember that we should create a new layer, okay, which is the bottom right here. And when I hover into it, it says create a new layer, as you can see right here. So I'm just going to click that, and just for some consistency, I'm going to rename this. Let's say I'm going to make this as a rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to make this as a rectangle. Now, I haven't created any shapes here yet. So for that, I am going to go over to this tool right here. That's the rectangular Marquee tool. So now, if I were to draw something, you can see a rectangular box appearing over there. And if I want to fill it with color, notice that I'm on the first layer, on the rectangular layer. Do not select the background layer while you're doing it, or you'll have some error. You'll find it. If you want to try it, you can do it. So I'm just going to select rectangle, and I'm going to press Control Backspace, and what that actually does is fills it with a background color, which is white thing right over here. So it is white. My background color is white, so nothing shows up. Since my foreground color is black, if I were to press Alt and Backspace, you can actually see it fills itself with black. So I can choose the foreground and background color. Simply click on it, choose red maybe, or I can choose another color, suppose blue. And if I then press Control Backspace and Alt Backspace, you can actually see that it changes according to the foreground and background color. I can even swap these colors by clicking on this little arrow over here, or reset it by clicking on this top small button over here. So now this is how I can create shape, and I can create more shapes. And let's say I can press Alt Backspace in order to create a black box, and I can move this around. So to move this around, I have to be on this tool, that is the Move tool. So I can move this around, and as you can see, this actually moves around the whole part because it is in the same layer. So if I want to create different layers or different shapes so that they don't stick together, I have to create a new layer again. Let's say, rectangle 2, and then I'm supposed to create another rectangle, press Control Backspace, Alt Backspace. Okay. So now, as you can see, this is independent. Now notice how the black layer is covering up the red layer. It's because my rectangle 2 is on the top of the rectangle layer. If I were to drag it on the bottom of it, so now you can see that the rectangle actually covers the black box right here. Oops, I'm not supposed to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to deselect this so that I do not select a portion of the layer. Simply press Ctrl D on your keyboard, and you can see that I can move this around. And if I select this, I can move this around, right? Okay, so now if I want to make this a bit more transparent, maybe I want to see the background layer, then I can play around with the opacity here. I can move this down and up. Okay, as you can see, now I can see through the rectangle, and it goes same for this one. I can reduce the opacity and I can move this around. So these are some options I have with me, so you can play around with this a bit. So let us move on and see what the selection tool is actually capable of doing, and then we are going to move on forward. So I want to hide these layers. I don't really want to delete it. If I want to delete it, I can click on this and click on the layer I want to delete and press on the dustbin icon right here. It says delete the layer, press yes. And if I want to just hide the layer, you can click on the eye icon right here, which actually hides the layer. So I can click it on and off according to your preference. This actually does not delete the layer though, so I can get it back whenever I want to. So I'm going to create a new layer. Always remember to create a new layer. So this is my selection experiment. Okay, so selection experiment. So I'm going to grab my selection tool. Notice that there's a small triangular shape underneath the button right here. So that means if I click and hold, I can actually access the other options as well. So I can go over. Notice that I'm still holding my left mouse button. So I can click on the rectangular tool, on the circular tool, and have an elliptical shape right here. If I want a perfect circle, just press Shift and you have a perfect circle, just like that. Okay, so just like that, I can add in color. I can press Control Backspace or Alt Backspace. Let me just change the colors so that it is more distinct. Okay, let me just change those colors. Alright, these are just random colors I chose. Control Backspace, Alt Backspace, and you can come up with this. And to deselect it, you can click on an empty space or simply press Control D to deselect. Okay, so now there are some options that we got to know which actually makes this tool very powerful. So I can drag in the rectangular tool, and if you notice that if I drag it again, the original rectangular shape disappears. But if I were to go over here at the top and select Add to Selection, I can simply draw another rectangular on top of it, and you can see it adds the shape. I can also add in an ellipse tool. Alright, for that I need to select this again, and I can go back to my rectangular tool. Notice that this has to be selected, so I can come up with the shape I want, just like that. So this is subtraction, so I can subtract it, and this is intersection, so it only selects the area which I draw on. So these are some of the ways which I can use to come up with new shapes. So now let us stick with the elliptical tool, and of course there are the single row tool, which will actually allow me to create single rows, and if I want to add in, let's say a line or something, I can do that with it. Also same goes for the single row marquee tool and so forth. So now I'm going to go over back to the elliptical tool, draw something, and since I'm still on this option, you can see that it drew my circle on top of it. So I'm going to disable that and draw it over here again. So let me disable this layer, create a new layer, and work around with this. Okay, so now as you can see, the feather over here is 0 pixels. So I'm going to draw a circle, press Control Backspace, and you can see that this is what happens in feather 0. So if I were to, I have to add in the value before I even draw the circle, so remember that. So I'm going to add in, let's say 10 pixels, and drag it out, Control Backspace, and you can see a soft edge over there. And if I do 40, okay, that's a lot, and Control Backspace, you can actually see the edge gets more softer. So feather actually means softer edges. So I can keep that to 0. 0. And you can actually see that there's another box over here that says anti-alias. So now if I were to select the rectangular marquee tool, you can see that there is no anti-alias because like it is not necessary in rectangular shapes. But in elliptical shapes, if I were to drag this down, you can actually see anti-alias. Press Control Backspace, this is the option, right? Okay. So now if I were to turn this off, drag it, Control Backspace again, now you don't see much difference right off the bat. But if I were to zoom it in, you can actually see the difference. So you can actually see this is the anti-alias version of the shape, which actually makes it seem as if the objects we draw are smoother. But if we were to turn off anti-aliasing, we can see that the object we draw are pretty sharp and there is no gradient at the end. So if you want to have sharp objects, then this is the way to go. But usually we turn this on because we want soft objects on our screens. So now this is what the selection tool is like. And the final thing we're going to focus on selection is this one. So I'm going to, let's say, create a new layer again. Let me just like press Ctrl A to select the whole screen, fill it up with a color, and then draw a circular shape over here. Let me add in the add tool, drag it in, and you can see I have a shape right here. Let me just add this in to make it, okay, maybe let me use subtract. So I have a kind of a shape right here. So I can actually drag it out, and you can see that I can drag out a shape out of this. You can do this with images as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to going back to the selection tool. Notice that when I'm in the move tool, it actually moves the shape. I do not want that. And the top bar also changes. It actually depends on the tools you choose as well. So I'm going to go over to my marquee tool again and click on something called Refine As. And what this actually does, it gives me more options on what I can do with it. So I can increase the radius, and as you can see the effect over there, I can increase the radius, I can smooth it out. Let me reduce the radius. You can see that if I smooth it out more, I get a smooth as it's right here. Although it was pointy in the beginning, I can increase the feather, decrease the feather. I can increase the contrast, so you can see the contrast over there. I can also increase the feather now to get more of that effect right here. I can shift as to make it larger or smaller according to my personal preference. And then you can output it to selection, okay? But usually I select layer mask on this so that I do not have to go over further processes. So I'm going to press OK, and you can see that now this is a shape. So I can play around with this, and this is actually quite useful for making logos. So now you might be wondering why I was focusing on the selection tool a lot, because most of the tools actually match that. So if you were to go at the bottom, you can actually see the Lasso Tool, which is also a selection tool, and it works the same way. And you can see Polygonal Lasso Tool. It actually allows me to click edges on it, edits at the side, and create some shapes. And also Magnetic Lasso Tool, and for this we actually need a picture. So I'm going to open up a picture. Simply go to File, Open. Let me go to the TutorTube Drive, Pictures, and start up with this one. Okay, so now if I were to select the Magnetic Lasso Tool, what I can do is I can click at one end, and I'm not holding any button right now. So if I were to drag this out, just like move the mouse, it actually sticks to the contrast area, as you can see. So it is easier for me to select this book. And if I want to disable that, simply press backspace, and it goes one step back. So I can recorrect it. Backspace. Okay. Now this part is a bit tricky. So it is not perfect. It's not the best tool that you can use actually. But anyways, this is something for a quick work. So I can do that. I selected this board. I can press Refine As we did it last year. I can smooth it out for a much smoother work. I can increase the contrast or maybe decrease it. Shift as and then increase the feather a bit. Alright, increase the radius and so forth, and output to layer mask. And you can see that the layer is there. It takes some time. So now I have this board. I can resize it as well. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. I can simply right click on it, duplicate the layer. Okay, I can duplicate this, right click, duplicate layer, duplicate this. Alright, maybe I want to resize it as well, or rotate it, whatever. So I can press Ctrl T on my keyboard, so that actually brings up this handle, and you can see that it is lost. It actually is taking the size of the original image. So I can press Shift, drag it to resize it, or if I don't press Shift, then it actually squeezes itself, so I hold Shift for it. So I can drag this around and press Enter. So you can see that Photoshop is capable of a lot of things just because of the selection tool right here, and this is what the magic selection tool does. So now I'm going to disable this again. I can click and drag it, so I can disable everything all at once. Now if I want to add in an image in an existing plane, I'm going to go over to File, click on Place, and then select this. Okay, so now as you can see this image, I can simply press Enter, and that will hold it into place. And you can see that the image is quite dark actually, so we are going to adjust that later on. So now, just to show it to you, I'm going to select the Quick Selection tool, which is more over like I can select, click and drag it, and it'll actually work like a magnetic lasso tool, so I can select some areas with it. So now, how do I know which part is being selected? I have a little brush over here, so I can increase the brush size by pressing the bracket keys on my keyboard. So if I were to press the end bracket key, it enlarges, and if I press the starting bracket key, it actually encloses. So I'll grab the brush size as much as I want. So I can also increase the brush size from this area right here. I can increase the size just by selecting on the slider. So I can simply drag it up just like that. Okay. So now, if you were to go to the magic wand tool actually is a one-click option. So it actually selects similar colors on the whole image. So it depends on what kind of selection tool you actually want. So I do not want anything right now, so I'm going to deselect that. And over here is the crop tool. So crop tool is more useful if you want to crop a size of the image. So now this is on 1:1 proportion right now. I can change the proportion, let's say unconstrained, so I can actually manually choose the size I want. And just press Enter. Enter. Okay. It doesn't work for some reason. Let me go back to this tool, and it says crop. Okay, so let's crop, and that's the crop. So now if you have, there are other tools as well. Slice is not useful for regular designs, but it's more useful for web design. And perspective design is more over for like this. So this leaf is not top right, so I'm going to go over here, and it says something. Could not use perspective crop tool because the image contains unsupported layer types. So to disable that, I can right click and just click on, is there a rasterize over here? Just click on that. Okay, and that's done. So now what I can do is I double click on that, and then I can select this area right here to make it upright. So if you have, let's say, a document that is not in the straight proportion, and you can see that, just press Enter, and you can see it from the top right. This is a very useful tool in order to actually straighten out flat documents. So now there are other tools as well. So this is the Eyedropper tool. I'm not going to go over to the other tools over there. Eyedropper is more like you can select the sample color, and as I click on one layer, you can actually see the sample color changes over here on my selection window, on my color palette. So I can reverse this, select another color that I want, and I can have my foreground and background colors. So now there are other things as well. Let me press Ctrl Z, and then so this to you. Okay, so this is the spot healing tool. So I can increase the brush size just like that, just by pressing the bracket keys. And maybe I want to remove this. So once I click it, it actually uses AI, that is artificial intelligence, to correct some wounds. So if you have some pimples or so forth, then you can just remove it just by clicking on this little thing over here. But it is not perfect. So if we go too far, you can actually see that it is not doing well. So what I can do is I can go over to Healing Brush tool, and for this I can hold Alt, select a sample. Maybe I'm going to select this sample right here and paint it over. And what it does is it takes the sample of that area and then blends it in right here. So it only takes the texture of that area, not the whole color. So I can go over here, let's say I want this texture, I'm going to paint it over here. You can see the initial colors in the beginning, but as you go forth, and wait for a bit, you can actually see it tries to blend itself. If you don't want it to blend it, then simply go over to Mode over here, press Replace. Now select the sample, and now it does not actually try to blend it in. It leaves the color as it is. So it's up to you how you want to want to use this. Path tool, then again, just draw the paths, drag it over, and it works kind of like a healing tool, but much more like a patch. Of course, there are other options as well. So since this is a crash course, we're going to cover up all these. So now here is the brush tool. So you can draw it out. You can increase the brush size from over here. Choose brush that you want. Increase the brush size. Increase the hardness, and you can draw it. So you can also have shapes at the bottom. So you can have grass shapes. So I have my little grasses over there. I can increase the size, and you can see the grasses right over there. So now this is how it works. So it is up to you. You can also download brushes from the internet if you want to. So this is the clone stamp tool that actually works similar with the patch tool and so forth. So I'm going to move over to this. This is the history brush tool, which actually removes all the effects that I applied onto an image so that I can revert back to an original state. This is the eraser, which actually, if I erase it, it paints it with the background color. Okay, so if my background color is green, for example, it actually paints it green. Okay, so now this is the gradient. So I can drag it on to have gradients just like that. So now I have white and cyan type of blue color. So I can choose the gradients over here and simply drag it out just like that. I can even click on the gradient and then choose the color that I want. So for example, I want this color or maybe this color. If I don't want some color or if I don't want this, I can simply drag it out and you can see that it removes the color. If I were to put one at the top, that actually is for transparency. So I want something to be invisible. I can do that. And this actually means transparency. Press OK, drag it out, and you can actually see that the effect is quite awesome. So you can actually choose the types of gradients from over here. Choose the types from here. This one, let's try it out. Just play around with it, and you'll get a lot of information just like that. Okay, so I'm going to go over back here and show you some other tools. This is the blur tool, and let me just double click on it so that I can go over to the image, double click on the icon. Oh, so this is the image. So let me just press Ctrl Z so I can go back in the beginning. Alright, this is it. Ctrl D and it's deselected. So now I can increase the brush size again, and if I were to paint it over, it actually stops getting blurry. And if I were to go over here, sharpen tool, then increase the brush size again, it starts to sharpen my objects. So now the effect is subtle, but if you keep on clicking on it, you can actually feel that the sharpness is increasing. And of course, there are other tools as well. We decrease the brush size. Okay, so that I can choose it. I can choose the smudge tool. Okay, what does this do actually? So you can actually see that it smudges the objects, and it's taking quite a time because like I chose a very, very large brush. Okay, shouldn't have done that. Alright, taking some time over there. Okay, still loading. So if you were to want to avoid like such wait time, then you should not choose large wait time. So anyways, so let us go over to the other options over here. So maybe I can just go over here. Okay, so this is the DOS tool, and what this does is it actually increases the brightness of an area. And burn tool, it actually burns the area, so it actually darkens the area. And then sponge tool, what it does is it takes out the color of one area, as if you're like soaking up, taking out the color with help of a sponge. So then these are all the options that there are. So we're going to go back, close this out, just to save the memory. Okay, close this out. No, okay. So now, if we were to go over here, this is the pen tool. So now, there are a lot. The pen tool is really vast, so I'm just going to show you the basics of it. So I can make any shapes like it, just like the polygonal tool, or if I were to click and drag, I can actually create a curve right here. So now if I were to click it again, you can actually see the curve over here. And if I were to click again, you can see that there's no curve again. So maybe now I do not want the curve from here. If I were to click again, you can actually see the curve. But if I were to hold Alt, click on the center right here, and then click, then I do not have the curve anymore. So this is actually useful for selection. And you can right click on it and just make it selection and press OK, and it actually acts like a selection again. So you can use that to your advantage as well. So now let me just press Control Alt Z over here, and then you can actually see that I can actually choose other options. Freeform pen tool, which is another form of pen tool. Add anchor point, I can click and add in anchor points over here, or I can delete anchor points. If I were to click on this, this actually deletes anchor point, so I have more control over it. And convert point, just to like, you can simply click on it and drag the anchor points. Or if I were to simply like hold Control and then move it, I can actually move the anchor points as well. So this is a very flexible and useful tool for it. This is not really easy to use and in the first go, but it takes some tries, and after some tries, after you master it, this is a really handy tool. This is what I use for most of the selections all the time. So now I'm simply going to delete this out. Okay, just press enter so that it gets deleted. Let me go to the text tool now, and just like Microsoft Word, you can actually see text. If you were to just click on it, you can type it around just like that, and we go back to text tool, new layer of course, and if I were to drag it, it actually creates a text box which gives me more options. So I can select it, choose the fonts, or choose the types of the fonts. I usually want my fonts to be smooth, okay, not anything else. I can move it to the center. I can add in some effects, just like that. Okay, I cannot see that effect, so let me add in an arc. Okay, so you can see the effect right there. I can also bring over some more options, and then I can choose the fonts again, maybe like choose this. And you can actually see that I can do a lot of stuff right here. I can make it all caps, or I can make it small caps. I can make it italics, or there are a lot of things I just can do with it. This is just like Microsoft Word, so you better play around with it a bit. Okay, anyways, so these are some of the options that you have, and this is the path selection tool, which is actually used for the pen tool. And these are the shapes which you can use. I can create rectangulars, I can select the fill, I can select the strokes. So there are many options over here. And you are not just limited to the shapes over here. You can go over to custom shape tool, which actually gives you this, and you can select a lot of shapes from here. And if you don't see this, you can simply go over here at the top right corner and press all, and it will show you all the shapes available in Photoshop. You can also download Photoshop shapes and then use it. So if I just want to see animals, for example, I just press that and I just see animals. So I can use the paw print, and this is the shape I get. And just like that, you can also select maybe like path. So this actually makes a pen tool version of the path. Let's see here, maybe let me just create a new layer and do it. So this creates a path, this creates a shape, just a shape. So I have the fill and the stroke color right here now, and I can select pixels to have a raster version of it, a normal version of it. So now these are something that you can get used to, and these are most of the tools that you have over here. Now I'm going to disable all this and show to you what you can do with the layer options just like here. So I can simply drag it in. Maybe I want to add in some effects. So what I can do is I can right click, go to blending options, and you can see I have a lot of options right here. So I can press this one and you can see a cool 2D effect. I can simply move in or move out. So I simply play around with the effects to know what it does, and you'll get the hang of it. So I can add in a stroke, I like to add in this shadows. That's what you usually see in most of the designs these days. So I can increase the distance of the shadows, the angle of the shadows. It's all like all of these effects actually have these sliders, so be sure to check them all out, and check them out, check them what they actually do. So I can color overlay and so forth. So let me add in an inner shadow. Where's the inner shadow? It's here. So you can actually see a bit of a gradient over here. You can increase the size, press OK, and you can actually see that this is the shape I have. And you can do this with everything. You can do this with shapes, with texts, with the selection shapes, and so forth. It can be used with all of the things that you just saw. And now I'm going to show you this one. Okay, so if I have the layer right here, I actually have the blending mode right here, which is actually cool. So if this is a normal mode, if I were to select dissolve, you can actually see that it is kind of dissolving, right? So now I'm going to go over and select darken, so it actually adds in the color. If I say lighten, it actually decreases the color and makes it like a different shape or different effect. Overlay, so you can actually see a cool effect right over here, and hot mix or divide, and select the shapes, and you can actually see different color effects just by using this. So this gives you an unlimited number of effects, because you can add in as much layers as you want, maybe like multiply and so forth, and get the effects that you want out of it. And there's no limit on how many layers you can use on it. Okay, so this is what the layer does. And now let us move on towards how to add in effects. So to add in effects, I'm going to go over to the images so that it looks more pleasing. So I'm going to use this. So now the problem with this image is that I do not have enough brightness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to image, adjustments, and where's the brightness over here? Okay, there's no thing such as brightness. There's just level. Okay, there is brightness over here. So now increase the brightness, increase the contrast, and you can actually see that's an immediate fix of the picture right over there. So you can use Lightroom to do this, or Photoshop. It is actually your preference. So I can go over here and select the options that I want to. So let's say, for example, if I were to select hue and saturation, I can actually change the colors of this. I can even select particular color of this, such as red, and then change the color of it. I can even take the sample color. Maybe I want to change this. Okay, maybe I want to change the greens. Take the sample color. This is the green I want, and it takes the sample right here. And I can change the hue and change the color of the leaves. If I do this too much, it does look unnatural. So do be careful about it while you're playing around with photos. So I can simply press OK, and there I have an effect that I want. So play around with the effects that are here to get various effects. So there are adjustment effects. There are filters over here which you can use as well. So I can go over to, let's say, liquify, and I have a new option over here. There are some options over here. I can simply click on it, and you can see what it does. So I can bulge it out, maybe click on it, right? Or I can use the Smudge Tool, increase the brush size by the bracket keys, and then simply arrange it. This is how they actually thin out the supermodels in pictures. So you can use this for your advantage for a nice profile picture. So anyways, I'm going to press OK, and you can see the results in the main canvas right here. So I'm going to go over to filter, and you can see there are a lot of filters I can use for this image, this right here. So I'm going to simply go over to filter gallery just to select all of these filters are actually available here. So you can actually go over here and preview all of the effects. Some of the filters might not be available, but these are most of the effects. So it gives you instant preview of what the picture is going to look like. So this actually makes the picture looks like this. So I can increase the brush size, and it gives in a more effect. Let me choose a subtle effect just like this, or maybe gloss. Okay, you can see the effect just like that. So I can add in a sketch effect, maybe just like a comic book effect. And you can actually see now this is green, the shades of green, because my, press Ctrl Z, my foreground and background color are green, so I wanted black and white maybe. Let me just duplicate the layers just to show you what is possible out of these kind of effects. So I'm going to select the topmost layer. I'm going to add in a filter, filter gallery, and select this kind of an effect, which is like a comic book effect. So I'm going to increase the size of it, So if I increase the size of it, you can actually see the comic book effect coming into I can increase the contrast as well if you want to. Okay, so this is what I want. Press OK. So now this is what I got. Now what I can actually do is I can select another effect over here. Maybe let's go to Filter Gallery again, and then I'm going to select Stamp. Maybe I chose the wrong layer. Did I choose the? Okay, I did choose the right layer. Okay, this is the one I want. Increase the smoothness. Okay, decrease the smoothness maybe. That's too much. Okay, this is what I want. This is the effect I want. Just press OK, and I got this. So now what I can do is I can use the blending options and use multiply or any other effects that I want. I can use overlay or I can use lighten. So you can see the effect that I want. So I can disable this. I can enable this. Let me use multiply again to get the effect I want, or I can use color burn, or let's say darken. Get various number of effects, and I can combine the layers and get multiple effects. So you can actually choose what kind of effect you want and then add the effects accordingly to your personal preference. So this is what Photoshop is actually capable of, and these are just the basics, and these are just the surface of the Photoshop which I covered. So if you want to practice more with Photoshop, I suggest that you check out these. Okay, and this is quite similar with what is available on Lightroom. That's why I didn't cover it over here. And these are some other options for further expansion of what you can do with Photoshop. So now, just before I leave, I just want to show you this. Okay, so if you want a black and white image, I'm simply going to go with channels. I can select the red tone, green tone, or blue tone and get the black and white color, the black and white image that I want. So these are the effects that I can use to actually get the effect I want. So as you can see, Photoshop is very powerful even at just the basic level. And Photoshop is used for quite a lot of stuff. Actually, it is used even to make cartoons, animations for your magazines, for your layouts, brushes, your contact cards, and so forth. So you can create a lot of stuff with this thing. So now, finally, I want to save this image. Of course, this is not much, but I simply want to save it. Let me go to File. Let me go to Save As. If I want to edit this picture, then I'm going to save this as Photoshop. So I'm going to save this as Photoshop in my TutorTube drive. Save it. That's okay. I'm going to go over to File, Save As. Okay. Again, File, Save As. Select JPEG in order to share it on the web or email. Save it. I do not want to replace it. Okay, I want to rename this to _edited and save it. And I can choose the quality of this. Let me have a high quality of it. Okay. Suppose I want to send this onto a mail. So mail, what I can simply do is I can go to File and click Save for Web. That actually saves a smaller file size of this, and it's actually optimizing it for the web, as you can see over here. So now, I gotta wait for a bit because this is loading. Alright. So anyways, while this loads up, let me select the, okay, it's loaded up. Alright, so I can simply zoom it out, and you can see that this actually takes 9 megabytes, which might be a bit high for the taste. And if you want to upload the photos to Facebook, 1024 is actually enough. So 1024 by 683 doesn't matter. Okay, width can be 1024, and if I do that, it actually optimizes it again. I can zoom it in, see how it looks like, and you can see it is 609 KB. So the quality is 100% right now. I can decrease the quality, and you can see that it is 80 now. So I can decrease it even more, quality 0%, but if you do that, you can actually see that there are some artifacts. You can see that there are little boxes over here. You do not want that. You want to remove that. So increase the quality a bit until you do not notice it. At around 70%, you do not notice much of it. When you zoom in, you kind of notice it, but when you zoom out, you actually do not notice it very much. So this is what web designers actually use to save a lower file size images so that their website loads faster. So I'm going to save this, save it as the web version of it, _web, save it, and that's it. So I'm going to go over to my pictures, and then these are my images. So I can simply open up the web version, or let me just use the preview, the Windows Photo Preview, so I can see the images that I want. So I can click next, and the next one is, this is the web version and this is the original version. So this is what Photoshop is capable of. And to dig in more further deep into it, I suggest that you play around with this, because I learned Photoshop mostly by playing around with it a lot, and I didn't have to take any classes for it, honestly. So now do check out my other tutorials as well. Please do be sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe.